Good to see you, buddy.
Welcome back. Yeah, good to see you too. Welcome back to All Things Monkey Pod. One of the things that I really like about talking to you is that you're in tune with this combination of the new age bleeding edge stuff, but also just have a lot of history in terms of planning things with discipline and being smart about the automations that we're building. And I think that for that reason, talking to you about something that's kind of like new agey in the world of AI through the lens of a more disciplined system is something that I'm really looking forward to doing with you today. So just to frame that up for people, we're going to talk about this concept of an MCP, which is a feature of AI platforms and integrations, and also talk about Keap and the Keap AI and Keap marketing automation system. Of course, what we talk about related to marketing automation and MCPs is going to translate to other tools and platforms as well. But that's the frame of what we're going to talk about, this idea of an AI MCP and a marketing automation API. Hopefully I haven't lost anybody yet. Any opening thoughts on that
Well,
concept?
let's get everybody up to date just in case we did lose some stuff. So most of us here that are listening are familiar with, even if they don't use it, just the idea of an API, an application programming interface, which is a really nerdy way of just saying using code to do something. So instead of having to log in to the UI or the front end of something, you can do it with code. And this is where integrations like Zapier and Make, those are all done with an API. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it is an open source standard that enables AI models to use APIs. So it's like an LLM API, but obviously there's a particular standard and way that it's done that that's way technical beyond me. But the plain English is that with an MCP, you can use plain English and talk to like I use Claude, I can talk to Claude and do stuff in my Keap database. And as long as it's doable via the API, the MCP can use it.
There's something you said a moment ago about about it allows us to interact with our systems using code. And then you also said, and Make and Zapier do those types of things. I think that's a really important kind of layer for people who think, well, I'm not a coder, I don't use the API. A lot of DIYers and pros use things that talk to the
Mm-hmm.
API, right? Like the Zapier, like the Make, like plus
Mm-hmm.
this, right? Like plus this isn't magically inferring what's happening inside of your CRM. They're going to the, in this case, Keap or whatever CRM manufacturer's API documentation and saying, well, these are all of the ways that we can interact with it. Now let's build a tool to interact with
Yes.
it. So whether the DIYer or the marketing professional has written the code or introduced a third party like Make or Plus This or Zapier or whatever, they're interacting with that kind of
Mm-hmm.
code, right? So the idea of connecting two systems together using the API and maybe a third party connector, I mean, most of us have been doing that for 10 or more years at this
Mm-hmm.
point, right? So is it fair to say that the MCP, if you're trying to think of where it fits, are you thinking of it as like a new age version of that connection product? Like it kind of sits at the same layer as a Zapier or Make, or do you think of it differently?
It is, yeah. It's a new age version of Zapier or Make, except you can just use plain English with it. So I could say, hey, go ahead and actually, I've got Claude open right now. Hey, can you find Cam Tulloch in my app, please? And so I just asked Claude that. It's connected up to my Keap account, and so now it's gonna use whatever API calls it needs to find Cam, which I'm pretty sure in my
Right.
database. And then I can do stuff with it. So I could be like, hey, go ahead and apply a tag, or can you like update his phone number to this for me? Which again, that's all done using the API. When we
Right.
use.
So the API always had a create
Mm-hmm.
contact, modify contact, find contact, delete contact. It always had those types of functions
Mm-hmm.
available, and essentially your plain language input of like, find Cameron, see if he has a phone number, and if not, put this one on it, right? Would be, or maybe you could even say, and if yes, tell me which one it is. If not, put this one in, or something like that, right? You can put that if it was a Zap or a Make, or a human interaction, it would be a multi-leveled process as well, right? But you're kind of giving it the whole series of instructions, but it's still going to reach out and find contact, return this value. It's going to do that to follow those instructions.
Yeah. So like a common use case for something like Zapier is using like Facebook lead ads, right? So you run an ad on Facebook, people click on the ad, it opens up a Facebook hosted form, pre-populates their name, email, whatever. People can make changes to it, and then they submit it. And then something like Zapier would see, okay, a lead came in, and then using the API, not us directly coding it, but still using the API, okay, go ahead and create or update a contact in Keap. And, this is the first name we got, put that in the first name. Last name we got, last name, email. And then, to kick off some automation, also apply a tag. With an MCP, you can do that in plain English. So actually, Cam, according to Claude, you're actually not in my app anywhere. It found 4 Camerons, but no you in there, which is wild. That's so now I could say, okay, I need to go ahead and can you add Cam as a new contact? Here's his email, and then can you tag him as whatever, as like a really simple example. So it's like having, it's using AI.
Yeah, you could have an assistant.
Yeah, an assistant. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, and the stuff you're talking about with Keap and Make, I think a helpful distinction as well that I'm just is coming to mind as we speak, is that that's probably still the right method for doing a routine on maps. Right. If it's a transaction moving from a commerce system to a spreadsheet system many times a day with like a predictable when this happens, then do that. Well, the MCP might not be the right method. But if you had a real live human assistant in your home office who came around and you said, hey, I got filming this content with Cam tomorrow, but if I don't put him into the database, I won't have this. Could you take care of it? It's still human initiated from you, but you can use your plain language to describe your objective or the steps you wanted to take or the plain language if else. If you find him, great. If not, create one and make sure you use his Gmail address as the way to get it done, right?
Absolutely. So like, for example, and this is where MCPs can be super cool because they can help you find insights and it really is kind of like an assistant. So it's like, hey, I could add Cam in there if you give me his email. Like, no, that's cool. And so I just plain English, hey, how many opportunities have a next action date for today? And so it's interesting because it says, hey, the filter only supports stage ID and user ID. We can't directly filter by next action, but I'm going to pull all opportunities sorted by next action day, and then I'm only going to count the ones that fall for today.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So that's overcoming some limitations that somebody who is writing the code. Now, could somebody who is writing the code have solved that problem that same way? Yes, but with a whole lot of brain power. Where Claude, like I kind of love that example because it shows an elegance to the problem solving that might have taken us as humans a little longer to get to. Where I'm sure it's been part of improv forever, but I read about it in the Tina Fey book, the yes and idea. This is like it's giving you the no but idea. No, I can't pull that data, but I can derive that data. So let's just derive it instead of pulling it. So that was going to be one of the questions that I had was about analyzing larger swaths of data, because our first example was see if Cam's there, if not, create his account, or see if he's there, if yes, make sure it's this current mobile phone number that's attached to it, right? But I think you've kind of already answered the question in that it could access many records and maybe store those many records inside of the AI's memory, at least temporarily, because you just gave the example of find me the opportunity records that have a next action date of today. But could it also be things like, assuming the API has the right endpoints, It could be something like, show me all of my customers who have spent more than $500 in the last 12 months.
If those tables are
right?
accessible via the API.
If those tables, so, whether it's Keap or not, or any other commerce system, maybe we're using an MCP to access Shopify or an MCP to access ActiveCampaign or to access whatever, potentially you could ask questions that are recorded across a whole variety of tables, right? So in order to find out which customers have spent more than 1,000 this year, is it could get that data from the table.
I'm asking it, by the way, are you able to look at order records
Does it have
in Keap? And it says, okay, so I guess not, at least for right now.
Right. Okay, so Keap or not, if we had an MCP plugged into our Shopify or whatever product happens to offer an API and an MCP connection, the AI like Claude would be capable of doing kind of a layered approach where it's like, okay, well, in order to do that, I'm going to have to find all the orders. And I do need orders that are valued at less than $1,000 because it's the sum that we're looking for. So I need to organize these orders into their contact IDs so that I can sum them, so that I can pull the name of those contacts, right? Like conceptually, it's capable of not just saying, go interact with this one record. It could be go interact with these many records at the same time.
Yeah, right. Which is something that you could have an assistant do. So it's like, hey, go find, like I'm asking it right now, hey, how many opportunities are in the system that aren't closed, that aren't in a win or lost stage? And so what it says is first, let me get the stages to identify what's won and lost. And so it uses an API call to list the opportunity stages and says, cool, win is stage 110, lost is stage 100. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull opportunities for that and go from there. And it's still thinking.
Because it's an LLM, I imagine it could clarify things for
Absolutely.
you. Like you might say win and lose, and it might say, oh, I can't find win and lose, but I can find won and lost.
That's exactly it.
Or because it's an LLM, it's going to make certain inferences and push back on you if it doesn't make sense and these types of things.
Yeah,
right?
It's pretty wild. And the cool part, at least for right now, the way that I've got my Claude project and whatnot set up, is that it speaks to me in a real technical way. And it just returned back. It said there's 44 opportunities currently not in a win or lost, and then it gives me a breakdown by stage, which is interesting because it actually shows me there's a couple of them. And because for Keap Children Rockin, for my nonprofit, I use opportunities to track schools, find out what equipment they need, track has the donation been made. Right. And there's a couple that are still in like the contacting music program stage and equipment purchased. And it actually gives me that at the end. It says, hey, a few things I want to note. The KCR stages appear to be a community program, not for the B Pro sales pipeline. So if you're only looking at B Pro, that number is tighter. It's super fascinating, which, I think an assistant that can talk to your CRM is probably the best way to think about it.
So would you, in Claude, there's projects, the different platforms call them different things, right? But the project is where you give instructions to this particular, this particular assist its own set of instructions. Yep. I wonder if the best practice then around using an MCP is to create a project that is the, your revenue ops, your rev ops assistant or your marketing analytics assistant or something like that, and let that project have access to, let it accumulate some knowledge around what your different statuses mean, or that in your particular company, you have your business and your not-for-profit running two different pipelines, but inside of the same database, right? Like, I imagine that you could have not just Claude in an MCP, but Claude with a project that gets trained on how you like to run your CRM.
Absolutely. I've given it, in the project, there's calendar rules. Because I have a set of calendar links for customers, for clients, and then a set of calendar links for people that are just leads or prospects. Because the availability is different. If you're not a paying client yet, your calendar links are only going to let you book on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons because that's when I have dedicated time specifically for sales activities. Or if you're a client, I have a set of calendar links that offer morning appointments and then another set of links that offer afternoon appointments. Because, especially for like international clients, so like people over in Ireland or Italy or something like that, I'm not going to give them my afternoon calendar links because that's like midnight, 1 a.m. for them. So I always send them my AM ones. And I've put those rules into the project. And so it understands that clients and leads get different calendar links and that there's no one master calendar link that gives access to my whole calendar. But here's something that's super interesting that just happened. Because again, I'm messing around with this in the background to give us some stuff. So I said, cool, hey, it's like, show me the people. There's apparently one person in the proposal sent stage. I'm like, who is that? It's this guy, Nick. Cool. And so I'm like, hey, can you see the email history for Nick? Because I've synced my business email to Keap. And so you have the email history in the UI. Now, this is what's really cool. Claude says the Keap MCP doesn't have access to the email history tool available, but the Gmail MCP is connected. You want me to search for my correspondence using the Gmail MCP? So it is the whole yes and or the no but, which is pretty genius, and that's what that's what a good assistant would do. Like if for some reason they couldn't get logged into Keap, well, I can go into your Gmail. Should I look for emails from Nick? And apparently there's something weird happening with the Gmail MCP specifically today. It says it's connected, but it's not responding. And so here's what I suggest: hey, go directly search for the dude's email. That'll pull the thread history. And then it says, hey, the opportunity notes say this. Would you like me to draft a follow-up email for this? So, like, it's pretty remarkable, this whole idea of using plain English to talk to your CRM. And if it can't do it, it's going to try and find a way to do it. Even if you have to do it manually, it's going to try and make that as easy as humanly possible.
Right. And this goes back to this is making me think again about the distinction we were making earlier about the difference between an automated workflow that runs at scale versus an assistant that you have a conversation with and then does stuff autonomously or semi-autonomously without you. As I'm watching you look off camera, type something in, get a result, that is an important part of the distinction, is that a lot of automations and workflows, you set them and then you maybe check them occasionally, maybe you wait for an error handler to tell you something's gone wrong, but the vast majority of our zaps and makes and high-level workflows and Keap automations, they're just doing what they're doing for months and months on end. But the way you're interacting with the MCP is you as a human with a out-of-the-box Claude interface in front of you within a project that you've connected up with these devices to do these things. So it's not like it's doing, you're talking about that one deal or opportunity that's still in the proposal sent stage. It's not like this is necessarily drafting an email every night at midnight for all of your unresolved proposals. It is that you are being a human using your brain saying, I wonder, I wonder if I've missed any revenue opportunities recently. Let's go ask for some help with that, which is very different from, I think, as automation builders, we often think about this like masterful plan. Every time a new lead comes in from a particular state, we're going to triage it to the most correct. We have these master plans of the things that we can, of the behaviors and desires that the users or the contacts have, where this is kind of the opposite, where instead of you as an automation engineer are proactively designing that perfect way of dealing with a new inquiry, you're kind of looking retroactively and saying, tell me what happened, tell me what I should do, what I could do, what did happen to this particular contact. They're so similar in some ways because automation and API is making it happen, but they're different in that it's like one is a master plan for one-to-many communications, and the other is still kind of a bespoke one-off for what I'm trying to deal with right now.
Yeah, it's super wild. So, and this is a really important lesson reminder, y'all. LLMs literally do not think. They do not think. They are probability machines. They take your input and they take their best guess to create a sentence that is the most reasonable thing it believes, right? So I said before, hey, it was having problems with the Gmail MCP, even though it was connected. Well, I went to double check. It actually was not connected. So I don't know why Claude thought the Gmail MCP was connected, but it wasn't. So I went and connected it, and then I asked for it to do it again, and then it was able to do a breakdown of the communication history for the last month or so with this proposal sent. And it even gives me a bottom line of like, hey, here's what's going on, and it says, cool, do you want me to draft the next steps email to get this project formally kicked off? And this is just starting to scratch the surface with what can be done with an MCP and AI. because I know that you can build specific skills. You can have it, execute things on a particular cadence or whatnot. What I'd love to get to, like the first major thing that I'm interested in, is using the MCP as a sales manager. Because if I can get a good sales manager that's like making sure that everything has a next action date, that notes are being left, that kind of stuff, I can now go ahead and build that for my clients. Or maybe that's something that I sell. Here's a knowledge file. Here's an MD file. Go ahead and pay me your shekels, and here's an MD file, and here's a tutorial of how to drop it into GPT or Claude or whatever you're using, and then maybe a little tutorial video on, hey, here's how to get it going. And then it's me at scale, not just the relationships at scale.
I'd love to ask, to kind of wind this thing up, if somebody was curious but skeptical, which I think is the default place for a lot of people in their AI journeys right now, right? They're having really rich conversations with ChatGPT to make plans, to sort through ideas. What is like a safe step one, do you think? Like what is experimentation in MCP?
I would connect the MCP up and then just start asking it questions. Don't necessarily have it do anything, but and even do it on yourself. Like, hey, what is my contact ID in my own app? I'm gonna see if it understands who I am. It should, but just start asking it questions. Get clear on like what can it do, what can it see, what's the what kind of information can you get. So anyway,
I knew that ActiveCampaign has an MCP. That's the first one I used personally, was the ActiveCampaign to Claude connection.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I had it making decisions about certain contacts. I did it in a sandbox. I didn't do it in a live production environment. I was having it create contacts in a totally, separate space. But, I do think that it's interesting that you can also ask it what it can do, right? And so I don't know that I would go to Google and say, does ActiveCampaign have an MCP? I would probably go to Claude and say, can you work with ActiveCampaign, right? Because you wouldn't ask your in real life human assistant, do you have the technical synapses in your brain and language to do, you're not asking it technically, like, do you know how to use Gmail, right? Like you'd be asking it in plain language, which is what these platforms are all about. Paul, I think this is a very cool idea, and I think that it shows, that these traditional systems like Keap and ActiveCampaign and market automation tools that have APIs are just naturally evolving into being accessed through MCPs. And I do hope that our audience can get excited to even try it and think about what it would be like to not know where every button and every field and every search parameter in the system is, and let our AI tools interact, not just in the way those companies are putting AI tools on their dashboards and in their interfaces, but with the like super flexible freeform ones like we chat with every day. I think that's it. Yeah. Any other closing comments?
It definitely is worth exploring and at least getting familiar with now. Just like how Zapier and Make and plus this was, many years ago. You don't have to be a developer to get two systems to talk to one another. And now it's kind of like a standard thing. Like if you can work in a CRM, but you can't do even just like a basic integration thing, that impacts your skill set. Not just as, guys like us that build automations, but also like if you're like a business owner and you don't have anybody on your team that can do that, I say often it's costly to be ignorant. So like start digging your teeth into, if you are, if you're not already using some kind of an AI, start playing around with it. If you are, connect it up to your MCP and just start messing around with it. See what's going on here. So like, yeah, and I'm having fun talking to it and seeing like, what can you do? What can it do? And seeing the novel ways it tries to get around the problem. So
very cool. Well, thanks for sharing this, Paul.
Yeah, this has been a blast.
You're welcome back. Welcome back anytime.
All right. See you next time.